Hey everyone, welcome to Resource Stage Study Hall. My name's Logan, here with the team at Horizon in the rentals live events part of things. So today we're going to be chatting about some lighting stuff. This is more of just like an overview, not going to be a super deep dive into a lot of the nitty gritty, but just enough to help you guys kind of get started. And the goal of this is also to help you with the language, so that when you're having these conversations with your tech team, integrators, sales, rentals, whoever, you kind of have a better understanding of what they're talking about and how you should be phrasing it so you can really get your point across. So we recognize that a lot of schools might not have lights, or they might have kind of a limited amount of lights. Some schools are really lucky and they have a lot of lights. But no matter what kind of equipment your school has, these basics should kind of get you on track to getting some lights plugged in and turned on. So to start off, we're going to start with hanging a light. And with hanging a light, obviously you need a piece of hardware to connect the light to the pipe. So that's called a C-clamp typically. A lot of the schools we sell them to use C-clamps. There are other options for lighting clamps, but this is the most common. I have two different versions here. This is the ETC C-clamp. As you can see, it says ETC. It's got three different sections. So the light is going to connect here. It has this bit here that you can tighten over the post. I'm trying to get this on the camera properly. So you tighten that to connect it to the pipe. And then this other little bolt here is called a focus bolt. If you release this bolt, this piece then comes loose, and you can use that to adjust the light while it's still tight on the pipe. Hopefully that makes sense. Another option for C-clamps is this one here. Looks very similar. You attach your light down here, you use this one to tighten it on the pipe, but this version here does not have the focus bolt. Not really a big deal, just something to keep in mind when you're hanging your lights and configuring them. So we're going to start off by hanging a light here. This is probably familiar to some of you. It's not the fanciest of lights, but it'll do the job, and it's quite capable. A lot of schools might have something similar to this sitting around. So we got our C-clamp on the light, as you can see, attached at the bottom there. We're going to make sure that this threaded section here is open all the way, and then you can just pop it on just like that, and then just tighten this down. For this, you really just want hand tight. You don't want to over tighten it. As you can see, our pipe here has gotten some nice dents and damage over the years. If you really are kind of a more anxious person, you want to make sure nothing's going to fall, you can take a C-wrench or a light tool and just give it like maybe a little bit of a turn just to make sure it's not going anywhere. Once you hang your light, super important, do not forget, you should have a safety cable like this, and you just want to pop that around your pipe as well. And that is in the very small chance that something happens with your clamp. You have a backup redundancy so the light does not just fall, especially if you're hanging it, above children's heads, 10 feet in the air, that type of thing. Very important to make sure your safety is on. And then next up, you need power. So here we have a twist lock. You can see that looks kind of funky. That's not a regular wall outlet that you would find at your house. These are not super uncommon in theaters these days, but I feel like our elementary school, high school clients are more likely going to be seeing an Edison plug. This is a conventional or incandescent fixture, and typically an incandescent fixture will have one of these on it. So there's little prongs you got to line up. Pop it in there, give it a twist to lock it in. That's why it's called a twist lock. And we're about good to go. One thing to keep in mind when you're hanging a light is you want to leave a decent bit of slack so that once your light is hung, you can move it around, adjust it as needed, that type of thing. And I am realizing I have hung this light backwards, so we're going to just fix that real quick. And you can tell if your light is backwards because there's an opening on the top here, whereas on the bottom it's solid, and this is where you can slide your gels, your extra things in. And because I want it pointing behind me, this is going to be backwards. So I'm going to unplug it, take the safety off. That focus bolt we chatted about, if you loosen that, you can just spin it around, tighten that back up, and we're good to go. So because this is a conventional fixture, incandescent fixture, it does not have power and data to the light. It just has this one power line that actually goes to a dimmer pack. So this line here is going down to a dimmer pack on the floor. Dimmer packs can be portable, but they can also be a large unit on your wall. They come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes, and that's what supplies the power and turns the light on and off. So this fixture here is a Fresnel fixture, and actually I'm going to just spin it back around for a sec. If we can get tight in on that lens mark, if you look at the lens on a Fresnel, it's got like these little bumps, these little ridges. So it's called a Fresnel based off of the guy who actually invented this type of lens. His name was Fresnel. You'll see these in lighthouses, that type of thing. The idea with this lens is that it diffuses and kind of spreads the beam of light in a very clean and smooth way. That's why they're called Fresnels, because they have a Fresnel lens. So if I go back over to the console here, we'll turn that fixture on so we can see it. And so as you can see, the edges on this one are pretty smooth. We don't have any harsh edges, fairly even wash. This is a bit of an older fixture, so it might have some kind of funky spots. And then kind of a common characteristic on a Fresnel is that you have a zoom. So down here we have a zoom, and I'm standing in front of it, but we can go all the way that way and make it nice and small. And then if we go the other way, nice and big. So that gives you some options for pointing it on your stage, directing it where you need, and really customizing the shape. Another good tool for adjusting the shape of a Fresnel would be, oops, I got an extra gel in here, would be a barn door. So this is what we call a barn door. It looks kind of funky, but it basically just has these 4 movable pieces, and then a ring here on the side. You can see it kind of sticks out, so that just slides into the front of the light, and that's why hanging your light the right way is important, because if this was upside down, there'd be a piece of metal in the way and it would not go in properly. And so the idea with this is that you can use this now to direct your beam. So let's say we only want our light going there. You can see we have a nice sharp line across the top, and we can pull it out, or if we want it on the sides. So you can really customize where your light is hitting. Maybe you want it to only hit the front edge of your stage and not bleed past, or there's a set piece, that kind of thing. So yeah, barn doors are great for really getting the light where you need it to be. So the next fixture that we're going to look at is a par. A par is quite similar to a Fresnel in that it is more of a kind of wash fixture. It's not going to have hard edges. It's going to have a more diffused edge like you can see on the cyc there. But this particular par is a little different than the Fresnel because, as you can see, we got a lot more than one plug going on here. So at the top here we have power, and then down here we actually have data. So your power and your data are coming in separate because this is an LED fixture. It's not a conventional fixture. There's no dimmer pack. You actually do not want to plug your LEDs into a dimmer. This is something you would just plug into a regular Edison wall outlet, nothing fancy. And the reason there's 4 is just because we have power going in and then power going out to another light. So with an LED, it doesn't get quite as hot. One thing I didn't mention with the Fresnel is around kids, you definitely want to be careful. This Fresnel unit, because it's an incandescent bulb, it will get quite hot. So just something to keep in mind. If it's been on for a while, maybe let it cool off before you take it down or move it around. LEDs will produce a bit of heat, but nothing near the level of heat you get for a conventional. And the fun thing with an LED is that you get colors. So if I go back over to the console here and I select that light, we can then do some fun stuff and just go through the rainbow and get some nice colors. In comparison, for a conventional, if we wanted to make it blue, we'd have to go and get a blue piece of gel and slide it in there. There's a spot kind of between the barn door and the fixture where it just kind of lines up. And then now we have a blue. And so that's kind of one of the big benefits between LED and conventionals. If you want to change your color on a conventional, you got to go up on a ladder or, get to the fixture to then put a piece of gel in front of it. If you have a production where you want to have blue and green and red, then that means you have to have 3 different lights because you need them to each have the corresponding gel, as opposed to with an LED, you can just have one fixture and change the colors as needed. So that kind of gives you a lot more flexibility, and you can get a lot more out of just the one fixture. So just something to keep in mind if you're looking into renting or purchasing some new lights. There are definitely upsides and downsides to the different options. All right, so that is a par. The third light you'll see we have on the pipe here is a spot. Alico, ellipsoidal, they have a couple different names. Typically spotlight is kind of the more colloquial name for it, but you might hear some of those other ones. So as you can see with the image on the site here, if we're comparing this to the other 2 fixtures, you'll see the spot has this like pretty defined edge, right? It doesn't go past, it doesn't have that nice fade on the edges like the other 2 did. So this is a really good fixture for you're trying to do a special on somebody, you want that really nice tight center, someone's doing a monologue, a solo, that type of thing. And because it's an LED fixture as well, we can also change the colors as needed. So same benefits there. Let's go back to the white. And so with a spot, you can also adjust the beam of the light. You don't typically put a barn door like we did on the Fresnel. You wouldn't typically put that on a spot, but a spot will have shutters built in. So if we get nice and tight here, yeah, we can see that there's these kind of like blades sticking out, and there's 4 of them, one on the bottom, top, and each side, and they can be adjusted. And so what that's going to do is the top one is actually going to affect the image on the bottom. So if I move this top one down, you'll see the bottom of the beam, and same on the sides. They are opposites. That's just the way the photometrics of a light works. So with that as well, you can really customize where your light's hitting. If you have a set piece you only want to hit certain pieces of, or you don't want it on your curtain, that type of thing, it gives you some flexibility there. Important to keep in mind that you have shutters on a spot. I've seen people hang spots, go to turn them on, and they're like, oh, there's no light coming out. If all of your shutters are closed, even if your light is on, like I haven't touched the console again, the light is on, there's nothing coming out. So good rule of thumb, when you're hanging a spot, messing with a spot in any way, just go over and make sure all of your shutters are open so your light is actually coming out. Another thing we have on a spot, typically, is the ability to, it's not a zoom, it's a focus is what we call it. So on the bottom here, there is a screw that I loosened, and we can actually slide this whole lens tube in and out. Oops, that was a little harder than I meant to there. And if we look on there, you can see it's kind of just changing the way that the edge looks. It might, I know it looks like it's zooming a little bit, but we don't typically call that a zoom. It's more just the characteristics of the edge of the image. So that's kind of the 3 main types of fixtures that we have in our rental inventory that we sell. There are a couple other types as well, but these are the more popular, more commonly used ones. So now that we've talked about the lights themselves, kind of what they can do, what the differences are, that kind of fun stuff, how do you use them, right? So when we're talking with schools for rental sales, that type of thing, the main focus when it comes to lighting is going to be lighting up the kids themselves, right? Like, for example, here, you guys are getting good lighting on me. You can really see my mouth. My face doesn't have a lot of shadows. So in your school production, even if you only have 4 or 5 lights, I would say your main focus should be that front wash so that parents can get that definition. When they're watching their kids, they can see their faces, their mouths moving, that kind of thing. And then if you have more lights, maybe put some, across the back, different angles, and that's when you can start getting into color and that type of thing. But if you only have a couple lights, I would say focus on just getting a nice wash on your stage and getting everybody nice and visible. So you got your lights, you kind of understand how to use them, you got them hung, you got them pointed in some interesting ways. So now what you can be thinking about, talking about with your team is gobos and colors. So some stuff to make them a bit more interesting. So we've already talked about color a little bit. LED fixtures will have color mixing. This console here is a fairly simple digital console that I'm using. But depending on how you're using the fixture, LED fixtures can actually be set to a preset. So you can say, preset 1, let's just leave it on that the whole time. If you don't need to turn your light on and off, that might be a simple solution. Instead of having to, have a console, you can just set your light to a preset, plug it into power, and you're good to go. That is an option for LEDs. For conventionals, you do need the dimmer pack and all that fun stuff. So just something to keep in mind. But we also have these fun tools called Gobos. So we're going to switch over to this camera, and you're going to see I have this, I'll pop it out. So it's just a little metal disc, and you can see it's got a shape cut out. And this is by Roscoe, and they have hundreds of different options. Not super expensive. It's a great way to add some details to your lighting setup. So to hang this in the light, we have something called a gobo holder, which is what this bigger piece of metal is, and we're going to just line that up in there. Something to keep in mind with gobos is you put them in upside down. Similar principle to when you're adjusting the shutters on a spotlight. Things are opposite because the photometrics of the light flip everything. And so if we go back to the wide shot, I have a fixture set up with a gobo already. And it's a little out of focus, but you can see there's something going on there. So we'll go talk about that one. So when you're talking about gobos, there are different types, different kind of things you can do with them. I'm going to adjust this lens, like we talked about earlier, to really get that gobo in focus. So you can see it's nice and sharp. If I slide this kind of one way or the other, it gets a little fuzzy. And depending on what you're doing, you might want it a little fuzzy, right? You might want it just for some texture, or maybe you want it nice and sharp. But that gives you definitely some options for a backdrop, for textures in your space. And because that's an LED fixture, if we go back to the console and I select it, you can change the colors. This particular gobo is called a leaf breakup, so we'll go with a green to give it kind of a leaf look. And this is quite close to the cyc, but if our fixture was way farther back, you might be able to use this to, cover the whole cyc or cover a larger area. And so if we go back to this spot, I'm going to go back to making it white, and I'm going to insert this gobo that I just showed you how to input into the holder. So I'm going to just tilt it up just a little bit. Actually, I'm going to tilt it way up. I'm going to show you where it goes, because it can be a little confusing. There's a couple different spots here. But your gobo is going right next to your shutter. There's a spot that holder will fit in perfectly, and it just slides in there, and you're good to go. So we'll lock this back down. And same thing, we can adjust focus, get that nice and sharp. And I'm going to bring the intensity down on that a little bit so it looks a little more like something on camera. It's a little blown out. Oh, there we go. So with gobos too, it doesn't have to just be a texture. You can do something like a window, and then if you mix in your color element, maybe make it a little orange so it looks like there's some sunlight coming through. And just two of these in the backdrop of a theatrical performance can really, add to it and kind of help create a set piece without building a set piece, keep things a little simpler for your team. Let me see what else we have to chat about. I think that's honestly kind of the gist of it. Just being aware of hanging your lights, what tools you have for hanging it, making sure your safety is on, and making sure you're using the appropriate light for the appropriate use Typically you want a Fresnel or a par to kind of wash your stage, spots for your specials, Gobos, that kind of thing. When you're talking about lights, keeping in mind LED versus conventional for power, for control, as well as for colors. There's a couple differences there. So knowing what you're trying to do would really help you decide what light will work best for your different applications. Controlling lights, there's a couple different options there as well. Like I said, you can do presets, you can do something a little simpler, and there's much more complicated lighting consoles. Some of the schools we work with are lucky enough to have EOS consoles that are very capable. So just keeping in mind your console when you're looking for lights, and knowing, how you're going to control them, that type of thing is important to keep in mind. And that's about all I have to talk about today. So feel free to stick around. At 1:30, Jordan is going to be chatting about just some basic audio principles, things to keep in mind when you're setting up an audio system. We do have a website, horizonsolutions.net, where you can see our rental inventory, reach out about, I think we might have a question. But on the website, you can also reach out about sales, all that fun stuff.
We do have a question coming in.
Just 1 second here. I think Jordan has a question that he's queued up on the Teams chat. And I forgot to mention at the beginning of this, but if there is a question, please feel free to type and Jordan will pass that along.
Okay, yeah, so we have a question from the chat here, Logan. The question is, I have an old Fresnel Incandescent in my auditorium. I replaced the bulb and then they died again within 6 months. What can we do to improve the lifespan? We've got almost no budget, zero money for to replace it. Everything's fundraised. So how can we get the most out of our fixtures? How do we get the most out of lifespan?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because absolutely, like a lot of schools deal with tighter budgets. You want to make sure you're getting the most out of what you're spending. So there's a couple things there. If it lasted for 6 months, it probably wasn't this, but important to keep in mind, you don't touch the bulb itself. The oils from your finger will transfer to the bulb, and that can damage it and seriously impact its lifespan. Another thing is it could be the socket itself. So if you find you're putting in brand new bulbs and they're not lasting as long as you think, basically the part of the light that the bulb clips into, that could be starting to go. There could be some funky wiring there. It might be worth looking into sending that to us to get looked at, to get repaired. It's not necessarily a super costly thing if your socket is going to swap it out, depending on the light. Some older fixtures, it might not be possible to still source a socket. But that could be the issue why you're burning through bulbs so quickly. And absolutely, like anything like that, and you're just really not sure, feel free to give us a call, send us an email. And one other thing, obviously, with any fixtures, conventional or LED, make sure you're turning them off when you're not using them, especially with something with a bulb, maximize lifespan. And even LEDs, you want to be unplugging the power. You don't want to be leaving them powered on, even if there's no output from the fixture, because the power supply, the internals, still have power going through them. So definitely something to keep in mind when you're using the lights. Make sure you're shutting them off when they're not in use. But yeah, that was a great question. Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the chat there, Jordan?
Nope.
No.
I'm just following up in the chat.
Perfect. Yeah. And absolutely those kinds of questions, feel free to give us a call, shoot us an email. We won't say, you have to buy something to get our help, that kind of thing. Like, we're always very willing to chat with teachers, figure out what they need, what they could be doing differently. Because, we want you to be getting the most out of your fixtures and these bulbs that you're because bulbs are not necessarily the cheapest thing as well, depending on the fixture. Yeah, so if that's all we have for questions, I mentioned that Jordan has his audio study hall coming up. Feel free to check out the Resource Stage website as well for more resources, resourcestage.ca. We have our monthly longer format streams on there, as well as that's where you can watch the upcoming ones. So on the screen there, you'll see that February 10th at 7 p.m. in person and online, we're doing a stream on cameras. So that could be really helpful for schools that You know, if you're being asked by your admin team, you know, how can we live stream this graduation? How can we, you know, record something, that type of thing? That could be a helpful seminar. And we also have monthly seminars or monthly resource stage streams, so feel free to check those out at resourcestage.ca. So thank you, and we'll be with you at 1:30 with Jordan. Take care.